Parasites Regained. The fourth episode of the new Futurama season just dropped. This is the one I, and most Futurama fans, have been the most excited for this season. The episode Parasites Lost released over 20 years ago in the show's original run, and was one of the hardest hitting, with Fry becoming infected with parasitic worms that made him smarter, stronger, and better in pretty much every way. But he made them leave because he wanted to become those things on his own. He didn't want Leela to fall in love with the worms instead of him. With the title of the episode, I was hoping we would get a sequel episode, where Fry was confronted with the parasites again, realized that he failed to improve himself in all that time since he was last infected, and had to seriously contemplate whether or not he wanted to keep the worms this time. But we got something completely different, with the worms targeting an important side character. A character that was a catalyst to many of the more serious and heart-wrenching episodes, and it was very interesting. This synopsis and review of the new Futurama episode will contain spoilers, so if you haven't watched it yet, go do that, then come back. The episode starts with Leela walking Nibbler in the park, where he immediately commits several crimes. When Leela and Nibbler get back from the park, Leela asks Fry to go watch a movie with her, but he is uninterested, so Nibbler offers to go to the movies with Leela instead. Leela is of course shocked that Nibbler can talk, which is met with complaints from Nibbler about Leela always forgetting that he can talk. I'm not sure why he's upset about someone forgetting something that he explicitly erases from their memory time to time, but Leela and Nibbler enjoy the movie together, then stop for tea afterwards, reminiscing over the film. This part reminded me of the scene in Parasites Lost where Leela and Fry have tea together, and it was a nice moment between the two characters. We get more scenes of the two bonding, one where they were playing a three-dimensional version of a crossword puzzle, which was clever and quite amusing. When Nibbler starts feeling unwell, Leela takes him to a vet, where it's discovered that Nibbler has worms and needs to take ivermectin to get rid of them, because they are eating away at his brain, making him dumber by the day. Also, the vet is just being a dick the entire time. After taking his medicine for some time, Leela asks Nibbler if he wants to play a puzzle game to check in on his cognitive health. To her horror, he much rather play tic-tac-toe with Fry. The medicine wasn't fixing his issue. The professor reveals the problem. The sand in Nibbler's litter box was infested with the worms, meaning that he was just getting reinfected every time he used the bathroom. When Hermes makes the suggestion of simply replacing the litter, Leela interjects and explains that Nibbler needs that litter to live since it's soil from his homeworld. I mean, that's fair enough. What are they going to do? Get more sand from the planet? It blew up. The professor suggests instead that the crew shrink down to microscopic size, go into Nibbler's litter box, and kill the worms themselves. Professor Farnsworth has the crew enter a toy tank that was enlarged by the enlarging ray, a reference to the invention in the first anthology of interest. He then has Amy push the tank down the track while he tries to shoot it with the shrink ray before it reaches the end. I would love to live in the universe where in this part of the episode, Professor Farnsworth just misses every single shot and the tank destroys the Planet Express building. Then they have to figure out a new plan. But they are shrunk and make it into Nibbler's litter box. While in the litter box, Fry picks up a mole rat, which bites him before scurrying back into the sand, kicking it up. Zoidberg inhales the fumes, which give him a brief psychedelic vision, which tells him something is coming. As he says that, the crew is approached by dung beetles, but the beetles pronounce it Doong beetles. That's right, this episode is a Dune parody. I've not watched Dune, so I didn't really appreciate the references as much, as I'm sure a lot of other people did, but these scenes are still really funny. Something I'll give credit to this new season for is they've consistently just had every side character exhibit really absurd and just unhinged behavior. The crew and the beetles team up when it becomes clear that the worms are their common enemy. The shaman beetle goes into a chamber of the orange dust to have a vision of what the safest route for them to travel is. They send the crew out with their second best guide, as their best guide died in the wilderness. While trekking through the desert, some of the wildlife is examined. Beautiful wildlife, such as veiny pus fungus, hairless sand pigeons, and little crawly guys that Zoidberg discovers with a magnifying glass. When they reach a dangerous part of the desert, near their destination, Bilgar, the second best guide, decides to take the course of action that his predecessor took. He sets up a device to draw the attention of the sandworm. The sandworm pops out of the ground, eating the guide as everyone else runs. While fleeing, they fall off a cliff. The sand breaks their fall, but the dust kicked up gets Leela high, warning her of a sandstorm. They are able to push through the storm, and as they are starting to lose hope, they make it to their destination. Bender begins tap dancing to attract the worms. When the giant sandworm arrives, it is revealed that they are thousands of tiny worms conjoined into one big worm. The worms separate as their king begins to talk to the crew. Fry immediately recognizes them as the worms that were infecting him. When asked to leave, they refuse, and an epic battle ensues. The funniest part of this entire episode to me is when everyone was doing cool things, taking out as many worms as possible, but Zoidberg's gun just broke immediately, so he was just standing there the whole time doing nothing. The battle kicks up a lot of dust from the litter box, enough for Nibbler to be affected. The dust gives him a moment of enlightenment, as he flies down to stop the battle as soon as possible. He explains to everyone that life in nature is beautiful and connected. The puss fungus grows from the minerals in the dust, is feasted on by the skin pigeons, eaten by the hyena moles, whose dung is eaten by the beetles, which gives the worms the perfect environmental conditions, allowing them to thrive, infect Nibbler, and eat his brain. Nibbler was fine with the prospect of becoming brain dead if it meant he didn't disrupt this sacred cycle. It was interesting to see the contrast between how Nibbler felt about this issue compared to Fry, how the different circumstances of the parasites made them come to different conclusions. The crew stands around Nibbler as his brain deteriorates. This is a deeper moment than I was expecting out of this episode. Once I found out Nibbler was the one infected with the parasites. Even though Nibbler would still be alive, he wouldn't be himself anymore, just a mindless animal. This was essentially a death scene for a character that brought so much to the show, and Fry's development in particular. Fry comforts Leela, a great moment between these two characters, but Leela needs closure to feel good about what happened. She goes back to the shaman beetle and asks if she can use her chamber. She denies the request because it might destroy Leela's mind, but after enough pestering, she gives in. While in her state of enlightenment, Leela discovers something. Not something big, something very, very little. At this point in the episode, I was asking myself, and I'm sure plenty of other people were asking this as well, how is it that the same worms that made Fry smarter are now making Nibbler dumber? Now, a simple answer to that question might be, Nibbler is quite smart, but with Fry, there isn't really anywhere to go other than up. But the answer wasn't simple. It was deeper, hidden beneath the surface. The one animal that Nibbler didn't mention in the cycle of life was the little crawly guys. The parasites were attached to the worms and invading Nibbler through them. They begin stomping on all the parasites, Bender even cracking out his tap dancing attire for the occasion. One of the parasites Bender smushed was Zoidberg. I think it would be pretty funny if Zoidberg never made an appearance again after this, but he'll be back. After a while, the worms repair Nibbler's brain function, and he is as good as new. The episode ends with Nibbler snuggling in Leela's lap. This episode was good, I'd say, even though I was expecting something different, and am a little disappointed I didn't get to see what I was hoping for. I'm not going to judge the episode harshly based on that alone. Besides, that really just means the writers aren't predictable, which is a good thing. In my opinion, this episode is the funniest one of the revival by far. Fry was catching strays as always, and the Beatles were all very funny. So far this season, I've been enjoying all the side characters immensely. Another character whose writing has been on point is the Professor's. Every word that came out of his mouth this episode was comedy gold. The bit at the end, showing Leela's perception of reality being completely destroyed, was a funny note to help close out the episode as well. In terms of the plot, it was also good, and so was the pacing. I loved seeing Nibbler in this situation and how he dealt with it. This episode was a great Leela episode as well. Watching her reactions to her pet going through this was rough, and brought a lot to the episode. I do have a few complaints though. The ending felt anticlimactic for sure. After saying goodbye to a beloved character, them undoing it and the explanation being, Nibbler Forgotten Animal, wasn't that great of a way of going about things. Futurama's best episodes have always been their most clever concepts. Meanwhile, toying with the idea, what if somebody was stuck in an infinite loop? They could exit at any time, but if they did, they'd die. And Luck of the Fryrish, exploring Fry's lineage and how his brother honored him after his disappearance, in a way I didn't see coming my first time watching the episode. This premise definitely loses me towards the end, with its overly simple resolution that felt almost rushed in when they decided that they still wanted to use Nibbler's character. This didn't ruin the episode for me, but it was starting to fall apart a bit towards the end. I'll give this episode an 8 out of 10. I was a fan of this one, that's for sure. I'll be honest, I'm not sure what the future holds for the rest of this season. It has been a wild card so far. My main complaint is we haven't really gotten a Fry and Leela episode yet. In the Impossible stream, Fry wasn't really conscious. Children of a Lesser Bog followed Amy and Kif more. How the West was 1010001 kind of just focused on everyone. And now Parasites Regained is a Leela and Nibbler episode. The next episode, related to items you viewed, seems more like a Fry and Leela episode, judging from what could be seen in the promotional material. I'm excited for that one, but also a little worried. The commentary so far has been handled okay, I guess, so I'm not really worried about that anymore. I'm more worried that this episode will be too similar, or fall into the same pitfalls that the Comedy Central episode, Attack of the Killer App, fell into. Regardless of how it turns out, I'll be here, watching it, and making a video about it. Go check out my review of last week's episode, if you haven't already, and subscribe so you can see my review of next week's episode, and God forbid, maybe a video about a show other than Futurama. I kind of want to cover some other things too. I will see you all later.